Here are all the changes that RTB brought in yesterday. Let's go through everything section by section. So section 9 talks about an authorized internet portal to provide notices that landlords will have to use. Now this portal went live yesterday. Section 12 talks about rent increase prohibition. So landlords cannot raise rent because of the number of occupants, and especially if someone who was a minor when the lease started moves in now as an adult. And if the rent can be increased, it will be limited to a set amount. Section 15 talks about ending the tenancy. Now, landlords have to meet the specific requirements, and otherwise they just cannot terminate a tenancy. Section 17 talks about longer notice period for landlords. If a landlord wants to end a tenancy for their own use, they must give 4 months notice unless a different period. And this period cannot be less than 2 months, and it will be specified. Section 18 talks about non-residential use. And landlords can only end a tenancy to convert the unit into a non-residential use if that use is specifically allowed by regulations. Then we talk about section 19. Now, it restricts the ending of tenancies for personal use. Now, basically, this is a tricky one because landlords cannot end a tenancy for their own or their close family's use or for a buyer's use in buildings with 5 or more rental units, unless certain conditions are met. We can always look into the detail by looking at the RTB. Now, section 20 talks about extended dispute period. Now, tenants now have up to 30 days, which was earlier 15, to dispute a notice to end tenancy. And this will not be less than 15 days going forward. So section 22 talks about increased tenant compensation if a landlord ends a tenancy under certain conditions. Now, the tenant is entitled to a compensation of either 1 month's rent or a set higher amount. Now, if the reason for ending the tenancy does not happen as specified, the compensation increases to the higher of either 12 months' rent or a set amount. Let's talk about section 23, which is basically extending the use of period to avoid compensation. Now, to avoid paying increased compensation, the landlords must use the property for the stated reason other than demolition for at least 12 months, unless a shorter period, which is a minimum of 6 months, is specified. Section 25. Now, tenants have a right to withhold rent. Tenants can withhold rent equal to the compensation they are owed if the landlord ends the tenancy and does not meet the specified conditions. Now, if the withheld rent is less than compensation that is owed to the tenant, the landlord must pay the difference as well. Next comes section 28, which is the mandatory online notice system. A new system will be required. It will require landlords to give tenants the end of tenancy notice through the online portal after paying a fee and without altering the notice form. Moving on to section 29, the director of RTB will authorize notices for in certain cases, basically. So the landlords will need approval from the tenancy director and must use a standard form and pay a fee for that as well. Moving over to section 31, it restricts the application of dispute resolution proceedings under the RTA to claims under a certain value. Now, this value will be between $35,000 or $65,000. It is probably still being finalized. And unless the applicant waives the right to recover any amount over those limits, they cannot really apply for a dispute resolution. Section 34 and 36 increases the maximum penalty for contraventions of RTB. And it was $5,000 earlier. Now it is going to be a higher amount. Moving on to section 35, there are increased penalties for certain offenses, and it will be now a higher amount than $5,000 as well. And there are new offenses that have been added to the list, which are based on everything that we've discussed earlier. Sections 39, 41, and 44. Now, these are the transition provisions, which say that any notice given before April 2nd, 2024 will follow old compensation rules and any notices that were given after April 2nd, 2024 will follow the new rules.